Welcome to Hagmann. It's the Hagmann Report, where truth can't be silenced. It won't be silenced. Nope. Portals to the truth include HagmannReport.com and also Hagmann Report Live. There, you should be watching this and listening to this via HagmannReportLive.com. We are not subservient to any Silicon Valley tyrant. Not to the extent of YouTube, although we're on YouTube and we're exploiting them to the best of our abilities. But the bottom line is this: in order to be successful right now, you've got to become autonomous. And you, the supporters of this broadcast, have helped us do that. And we couldn't do this without you. So I'm going to say thank you. Now, this hour so special to me because I've got my great friend Steve Quayle, one of the best friends I've got on the entire planet, Steve Quayle. And he's got a legend. I'm telling you, this guy's a legend. Mike Adams, you know him. And I heard him just a little bit during the break. And basically, I'm going to just tell you this, okay? From the last hour to this hour, I'm going to let everyone out there know we are just getting started, and that applies on many different levels. But someone just getting started, of course, is Steve Quayle and Mike Adams. And the focus right now, and I'm going to let Steve take it, is we got Branson coming up, Branson, Missouri, the conference in Branson. I want to tell you, folks, if you don't go, I mean, look, if you are not plugged into that, to be there is to experience something you'll never experience again in your life. If you can't be there for whatever reason, infirmary, family crisis, whatever, live streaming, okay, as well as get the previous DVDs. But the bottom line is Steve has assembled the most amazing people for Branson 2019. And with that, I'm just going to stand back. I'm going to hand it over to Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com, a guy, by the way, not decades, but a quarter of a century ahead of his time. And I'm just going to hand it over to him. Steve, go for it, my brother.
Well, thank you, Doug, and what a joy it is to be able to announce that Mike Adams will be one of the keynote speakers on Friday night at Branson. Mike contacted me, and it's interesting because we both come at the changing of the planet and the intentional destruction of the planet from external forces, and in my case, fallen angels, and Mike's case, exobiotic entities. But the thing is that, ladies and gentlemen, all of it makes sense. So I'm going to tell you that Mike Adams, the health ranger, has basically the Rosetta Stone to understanding what's going on in the food, all of the wacky weather, the whole manipulated realm of our existence is for your demise. And Mike has spent his life, he's a scientist, he absolutely knows what he's talking about, but he joins the ranks, and I'm privileged to be in those ranks of being the most censored guys on the internet. So, Mike, thank you for coming on. By the way, thanks for being one of the speakers. And, you use the word terraforming. I use the word terrorforming. Go ahead, sir. And again, thanks for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm really humbled to be a speaker at your event. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to present this really bombshell information to the public. And also, Doug, to be on your show is quite an honor. I'm a longtime listener to your work, and you have done amazing journalism over the years. And in fact, all of us, we are the guardians of humanity in a very real sense in terms of teaching people what's coming and what's important. So I'll get right into it, but I just wanted to say thank you to both of you.
Well, thank you. And Mike, before we get started here, please give out your website where people can go to find your excellent work, although it's on it should be on the screen, but go ahead and give out your website.
Sure. Naturalnews.com is our primary site, but we also built a YouTube alternative, a video community called Brighteon.com, and it's spelled like the word bright, E-O-N, like brighteon.com. And it's got thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of videos, and it is really taking off now. So
we're going to be hopping on.
If you listen out there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We're going to be hopping on to the extent you'll have us. And
yeah, absolutely. Because everybody's being censored. Vimeo has started banning channels for Dare discussing vaccine ingredients. You know the deal with all the censorship, but they're censoring anti-cancer channels now. If you talk about cancer curing food, you are now censored. Wall Street Journal did a hit piece on a guy named Chris Wark. He's known as Chris Beat Cancer, by the way, simply because he overcame cancer without using chemotherapy. I mean, think about where we are. The Wall Street Journal attacks people for teaching nutrition and healthy eating. That's the world we live in now. And it's just the tip of the iceberg, as I'll get into here. So, Steve, you want me to jump into some of the terraforming?
Yeah, I do, Mike. And again, when you need a break, I'll speak up, but brother, go for it, because this is the most critical issue of our time, and this is why it's so critical that Mike was appearing at Branson, because there's everybody that's going to be there, from alien specialists to paranormal investigators, flying saucer, reverse engineering experts, but the big picture is what Mike's going to present. So go ahead and go for it. You don't need to hand it back to me or Doug until you need a break or need something, but go for it, sir.
Okay, well, feel free to jump in or pose a question or a comment at any time as well. But I'll give the audience kind of a preview of what I'm going to be speaking about at the upcoming conference in Branson. And it's the most detailed presentation I've ever put together. I've got a graphic artist team putting together the slides and the charts to go with this presentation. And I'll also be giving a download link to every attendee, and every person who buys the live streaming will get a download link to download these notes for themselves. So I want to make sure everybody gets not just the lecture, but you can do your own research, and I'll give you some places to start. But I came at this from really a science angle. I run a science lab. We do analytical testing of food and water and even human hair. We have multiple mass spec instruments. The lab is called cwclabs.com. I just mentioned that so you can pull it up if you want to. It's not like we really sell much in terms of services to the public or anything. We do this to test all our own products in-house, before we sell them. We find so much contamination of glyphosate, weed killer, and toxic heavy metals, cadmium in cow nibs, things you wouldn't believe, pesticides in resveratrol, for example. So we do all our own internal testing. And as part of this, I have 2 chemists on staff, and one day we were talking about this climate change push, about stratospheric aerosol injection, which is geoengineering or chemtrails. And you've seen, I think John Brennan did a piece on C-SPAN talking about how this stratospheric aerosol injection was going to save our world because they would dim the sun. So you're talking about putting pollution into the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide, which we would typically call smog. And it really struck me that why would scientists want to pollute our atmosphere? Why would scientists want to dim the sun? And immediately I started putting the pieces of the puzzle together to say, look, photosynthesis is what drives all life on our planet. So photosynthesis is the process by which plants create energy, and that's what grows your food, and that's what creates oxygen. Plants off-gas oxygen. And photosynthesis has just 3 inputs, just 3, and I'll mention them here. But the globalists are at war with 2 out of those 3. And those 3 inputs are solar radiation, i.e. sunlight. The second one is carbon dioxide. And the third input is water. And with just those 3 inputs, plants produce plant stems and leaves and seeds and flowers and pollen and support the pollinators. They grow food. They create fatty acids in almonds and avocados, for example. And they also produce oxygen that we need to live. And the oxygen levels are dropping in the atmosphere, by the way, slowly over time. They're about 20% right now. But if they get much lower, humanity will asphyxiate. And I started putting the pieces of this puzzle together, realizing that if you block just 1% of the sunlight, you would turn many areas of the world into deserts, areas that are currently grasslands. You would destroy rainforests, many of them, certainly on the margins. You would plummet food production, especially in marginal third world nations where food production is just barely getting by, where they need every little bit of solar radiation for their plants. They need every bit of carbon dioxide for their plants. And if you start to shut down these inputs, then you start to cause a global food collapse, which would result in mass starvation, social unrest, geopolitical upheaval, civil war, everything that goes with scarcity of food. which causes mass chaos in every society throughout history. And think about it, the climate change pushers, they want to dim the sun and they want to shut down CO2. Under Barack Obama, the EPA declared CO2 to be a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is the greening molecule for our world. More CO2 means greener plants. It means more food production. It means more flowers in the rainforest. Carbon dioxide is the miracle molecule of life. You know how they say there's a God particle in physics? If you could name a God molecule for life on Earth, it would be carbon dioxide. That's how important it is. And every media outlet, every mainstream scientist, every politician like Al Gore is out there saying we have to get rid of carbon dioxide, and they've declared a war on carbon. Well, a war on carbon, listen closely, excuse me, a war on carbon is a war on humanity because humans are carbon-based life forms. Everything that's alive on our planet is a carbon-based life form. So a war on carbon is a war on life on our planet. And once you realize that, it is inevitable to conclude that the primary influences of our media and the science establishment and all these politicians out there pushing this, the primary influences are non-human. In other words, they are preparing Earth for what I call the post-human era. Terraforming is underway, and the goal of the terraforming is to dim the sun, lower oxygen concentrations in the atmosphere, collapse Earth's food webs, and make Earth a colder, more frozen planet. Think about the climate change pushers. They always say the enemy is warming. They say the enemy is more liquid water. They don't want liquid water. They don't want the oceans to rise. What do they want? A frozen planet. They want a new ice age to spread ice across the northern regions of most of the continents that we know around the world, certainly North America, Europe, and so on. And this is a plan to turn Earth into a dead, frozen planet to kind of reboot the life on Earth, to get rid of humans and to get rid of the native life forms as much as possible so the planet can be reseeded, repopulated, recolonized with a life form that obviously comes from a place with a dimmer sun, with lower oxygen concentrations, with less carbon dioxide, and a place that is much colder, which, by the way, describes a planet like Mars. It doesn't have to be Mars in particular, but it describes a planet that is farther from the sun, that has all of these characteristics. And so this realization is driven home every time you hear climate change advocates talking about how they want to save the planet. They're not lying. They do want to save the planet, not for us. They want to save the planet for a post-human era. And when they push climate change, they're not lying either. They do want to change the climate. They're changing the climate right now. Terraforming is underway. It is advocated by all these scientists. And unless we stand up and stop this, Earth will be made largely uninhabitable by human beings. So that's
Mike,
the summary.
Let me interrupt something here. We are carboniferous life forms, to quote a Star Trek statement. We're obviously, God created us out of the dirt. But here's what's interesting. Everything that's headed to AI, artificial intelligence, is silicon-based, i.e. transistors, i.e. every, if you will, higher form. Isn't it interesting that a synthetic life form and synthetic reasoning and synthetic ideals, and I'm saying those are alien to us, and I mean literally alien, but isn't it interesting that Jesus said, and he did, if he didn't shorten the days for the elect's sake, there'd be no flesh left alive. So you have the war of silicon-based entities against carbon-based created people and animals and stuff. And isn't it interesting when you describe the cold planet, most of the exobiologists and astrobiologists I'm talking to, they're all looking for the coldest places like Io and Titan, the moon of Saturn. That's where they're looking for life forms. But those life forms are they look at a bacteriological or kind of a prehistoric virus. They're not. These are intelligent. We're not talking about bacteria getting it on with a protozoan and producing a multicellular organism. We're talking about entities, evil entities that have only the destruction of mankind and God's total creation. God created everything, saw it as good. The devil and his fallen angels hate that, and so that's the take on why it's so important, ladies and gentlemen, for what Mike is saying. When I first contacted him, I'm going to give it right back to you. I said, Michael, this was the missing part that we needed, and lo and behold, now it's there. And so I want everyone to pay attention to what you're saying, because when I first brought the attention of chemtrails to people, I discussed again the global dimming and all that stuff, and I said, believe me, these dimwits want you dead. And do you find, even with now in your presentation, that, Mike, you pour your heart out, you pour your money, your research? Do you think, if you were to give Doug and I, for instance, and the listeners, what percent of people, knowing what you know, knowing what you present, would you say are starting to understand? My guess would be a very small percentage. Go ahead.
It is. It's a very small percentage, but it's increasing. And surely most people living today are not living in the real world at all. They're living in an artificial construct based on silicon, like you said. They're living on Facebook. That's their world. That's their reality. It's an artificial construct. They're living in the matrix. But what I found interesting about what you just said, Steve, is that humanity's conquering wasn't really made possible until the rise of the age of silicon. Because it's only as humanity has now surrendered its consciousness to these tech systems where people, they live on, they use Google for all knowledge now. They don't have a memory of anything. They ask Google to tell them what to think. They use Facebook for their reality. They use Twitter to pretend to be someone that they're not. People have surrendered everything to silicon, and then by the centralized control systems of the tech giants, humanity is able to be controlled. And it's only by this that you could convince an entire world that warming is bad, that liquid water is bad, and frozen water, which kills plants, by the way, is good. And you think about these climate change pushers, they're all talking about how we need more ice, right? I mean, it's blatant. They decry, the icebergs are melting. Oh my gosh, this is liquid water is horrible. They're insane. Frozen water is death. Liquid water, warmth, is life. And CO2 is called a greenhouse gas because it's used in greenhouses to grow plants. There are, orchid growers and all kinds of greenhouse operators, they buy carbon dioxide generators because the plants run out of CO2 and they need more CO2 to flourish. And so a CO2 generator, by the way, is usually just piping in propane, and the propane is just essentially burned or converted to release carbon dioxide, and then the plants love it. That's why it's called the greenhouse gas. The thing that strikes me, Steve, is how the evidence of this is all out in the open, and yet 99% of the population has been fooled into thinking that warmth is bad, that the sun is bad, that rainfall is bad, and that rising ocean levels is bad. The ocean levels right now are too low compared to where they have been in the past. You go back to the age of the dinosaurs, 66 million years ago, according to mainstream science, right? If you want to quote mainstream science. Well, even mainstream scientists said that the Earth was lush and warm and full of rainforests, and it was a beautiful utopia. Well, guess what? According to them, the oceans were hundreds of feet higher. So you have these people come along today and say, no, we have to have death and no carbon dioxide and ice everywhere. Like, they're describing the ice planet Hoth from The Empire Strikes Back. And I don't remember seeing any jungles in The Empire Strikes Back on that planet. So that's where we are right now, Steve.
Well, I think, and I think, Doug, feel free to chime in on this. The substitution of virtual reality, and I would say this, present death, virtual reality in my equation makes present death, is the divorcing of the human mind from any form of rational or cognitive thinking. And so what we've got now, we've got a nation, actually a world, if you take all the Facebook, and I call that Faces of Death, by the way, Michael.
Yeah.
But the Faces of Death book, you have people that have to be told everything. And now healthy food, and address that, because the poisoning of our food, the synthetic nature of what's going on, all of the, if you will, the attempt to rob mankind, carboniferous life forms, from obviously carbon dioxide, photosynthesis, and what God created for us for good. Now, basically, we're eating monster mush. And I mean that, monster mush. Today's technology, tomorrow's monsters, garbage in, garbage out. But will you address the coming famine? Because these people, they're on record. Wasn't Kissinger said, with food we control people, deciding who lives, who dies? Address that
absolutely.
for a little bit, because I think people have got to understand that. We are what we eat, and if we, that's their attitude to how they treat us.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, Steve. There are many vectors for eliminating human populations. And there are really two approaches, the slow kill method and the fast kill. And I cover both of these, by the way, in the presentation in Branson coming up. So slow kill methods focus on infertility. And this is where Bill Gates has put a lot of his money, is in infertility technologies. But infertility is also caused from hormone disruptors in the plastics that are in the food supply. And I don't know if you've been watching this in the news. I think I've seen some headlines on your site, Steve. Microplastics are now everywhere in the food chain. So even if you're not eating out of a plastic tub, there are microplastics in your meal. In fact, there are microplastics in bottled water. And these plastics cause hormone disruption. And they contain hormone mimickers, BPA and many other things, estrogen mimickers and so on. And so the rise of transgenderism and gender fluidity, as it's called, I call it gender insanity, across the culture, is a result of mass chemical contamination. I'm hearing someone's breath in the phone there. But the mass exposure of the population literally does alter the physical expression of hormones and genetics, and it can turn males into females. And that's not just an Alex Jones meme where he was screaming, "Turn the freaking frogs gay." Turns out Alex Jones was right. Atrazine, which is the second most common weed killer chemical in the food supply, atrazine is well documented as a chemical castrator. And it's documented to turn amphibians essentially gay, basically to cause the expression of dual sex organs in male amphibians. It's widely known. It's well documented in the research. But your average leftist or your average fake news reporter on CNN will come on and they will mock that and say, "Oh, you're claiming juice boxes will turn frogs gay," or whatever. Well, guess what? If you look at the science, chemicals do have an effect. And we're seeing this rise of gender confusion and gender insanity. Now that's a slow kill vector. And of course, it's amplified by the culture, where you have the media come on and say, yeah, it's great to have 10-year-old gay, transgender boys dancing in gay bars in New York. Good Morning America, favorite guest, right? That's what we saw. The insanity is pushed by culture and media because it's about the destruction of sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is the basis of the continuation of life on our planet. It's not just humans, of course. You look around nature, you go to all the animals that are even mentioned in the Bible, loaded onto the ark, all the animals out in the fields right now today. I live on a ranch in Texas. I observe nature. Guess what? It's all sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction requires a male and a female. And without that, your species ends in literally one generation. And this is what the globalists are trying to push now, to say that there's no such thing as a biological man or a biological woman, or that you can change your biology, or even worse, you should, I apologize for the brazenness of this, but they're saying you should cut off your reproductive organs and be gender neutral so you don't offend anyone. This is the new push. And it's all part of the slow kill.
Mike,
it's about.
Let me ask you, if I can interject something here. This is Doug Hagman. To me, this is the most abhorrent, perverse, evil crap I've ever heard in terms of these Muppets out there that actually perpetuating the fact that you need to cut off your dangling participle in order to become, whatever. Okay, but let me ask this: how in the hell can these idiots deny science? There's only two genders, folks. You either got the plumbing that shows or you don't. Okay, it's simple as that. You're either a male or a female. Two genders, right? Do I have that? Is that right, Mike? I mean, or is that sexist?
Absolutely.
Two sexes or two? Okay.
Only two genders. You got it.
All right. I just want to make sure now. So people go out there, deny science, and say, "Oh no, that's not." Yet they will push the scientific crap about the global warming and stuff. Okay, they're denying science. Help me out.
Hey, Doug and
Yeah.
Mike, I think what the bigger point here is the end of sexual reproduction, biblical sexual reproduction. When the introduction of sex robots, and I dealt with that, Mike, years ago in a book called Genetic Armageddon, Today's Technology, Tomorrow's Monsters. Well, now we've got today's monsters, and it was yesterday's technology. But what's fascinating to me is you're watching this happen in real time in Japan. Japan is literally dying. They have lost their ability to reproduce. Even in white Russia, that's meaning the Christian Russia, the Caucasian part of Russia, even Vladimir Putin recognized that, 10 years ago when he was encouraging people, to basically go out and make babies. But the problem is, and here's where it comes to Doug politics and Mike, the world of Islam, which basically is procreating at a beyond necessary rate, they said our women's wombs will become the vehicle of the West's destruction. And Mike, what you're telling us and Doug is that people don't understand their own destruction. I used to say dumb unto death, but now I should change it to participating in your own annihilation. Your thoughts on that? Because sex robots are designed to do the same thing. And also, I'm on record as saying, with the ability to instantaneously now define DNA, it becomes the perfect techno-assassin or robotic assassin, So we're watching the total twisting of every boundary, every normal realm. The word normal, remember, to these people who are to these entities who are controlling the puppet people, they don't understand they're participating in their own death. So that's why Branson is so critical, because it's already happening. And, with all of the, let's say, pronouncements from the U.S. Navy and showing spacecraft that, everybody sees in the sky, but they deny. But, Mike, tell people how you came to the conclusion, if you will, that there is a supernatural evil intelligence, non-human entity, let's just call it that is absolutely telling people what they're going to do, and then the people are openly embracing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of this goes back to one of Doug's questions or comments that I think segues into that. Let me answer that. I think if you look at the research over many, many generations that's been pushed by the Rockefellers and globalists, a lot of their research into social engineering has discovered two very important things about controlling humanity. Those two things are, number one, neuroplasticity, which means the ability of the brain to be reprogrammed, literally reprogrammed to accept any reality as true. So that's one. And then the second thing is social conformity, where people desire to be socially accepted to such a degree that they will literally participate in a suicide cult. They will destroy themselves in order to be accepted by their peers who are also engaged in that same suicide. These two factors have been very aggressively exploited by the globalists. So first, neuroplasticity. What it means is the survival of the human species and the ingenuity, the entrepreneurship is amazing. It's one of our greatest traits. We have a physical brain and a non-physical spirit and a soul. And these two things interface in a way that can learn new things, discover new things, create new things, and overcome obstacles that we've never seen before and none of our ancestors have ever seen before. So we can reprogram ourselves to overcome and adapt and survive. That has been exploited by the globalists through media programming and through tech giants' censorship and social programming. Now, to convince people that a fake reality is real, i.e., there are 7,000 genders, and that the real world is fake, i.e., there are no longer any such thing as chromosomes and biology. So the neuroplasticity has been weaponized against us. In other words, one of the greatest features of humankind has now been turned as a weapon against us for our self-destruction. The second thing is the social, the peer pressure, the desire to conform. The connectivity that was created by Facebook and the internet has now amplified people's need to conform, and it has created irrational waves of fanaticism, of left-wing radicalism. And this is exacerbated by the fact that conservative voices are censored on Twitter and all these other, tech giant platforms, leaving only the radical left to continue to amplify its own insanity. So you see this insanity ripple through like waves, and most people are participating as virtue signalers, where they don't necessarily even believe anything themselves. They're just signaling to all their friends that, yes, I want to belong. Please love me, accept me, embrace me as part of your group because you're the popular group, right? That's what we're looking at on a global scale. But the substance of what these groups believe is insanity. It is delusion. Transgenderism is the perfect example of it, but you could also cite the disastrous economic policies of Democrats and the collapse of their cities like Seattle and Portland and San Francisco. And now even Austin, Texas has become a homeless, destitute wasteland devolving into a third world status. I was there a couple of days ago and I saw some of it myself. It's astonishing what has happened as liberals are in charge. But those two things, to answer your question, Steve, I think those two things are now, they've been weaponized against humanity to convince humanity of almost anything, including mass suicide. And remember that Star Trek episode where they did a war simulation, and if you were killed in the war simulation, you were supposed to report to the euthanasia chamber? Remember that episode?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's worth revisiting.
I do.
It was a great episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, Doug?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah. So that's what we have today, where people have been convinced that they have to kill themselves, or they have to participate in the destruction of humanity in order to be socially accepted. And that, to them, is more important than survival. And a lot of them, frankly, just haven't thought through any of this, so they're just going along with the sheeple rushing off the cliff. But the bottom line is, most of humanity has become a suicide cult. The few survivors who really represent the future of humankind are all being censored and silenced, but we are the ones who have the answers for how we can make it through this. But frankly, the masses won't probably make it through much more. They're going to kill themselves. They're begging for it.
Bottom of the hour, just ID. Folks, you're listening to Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com. Mike Adams, naturalnews.com. That's naturalnews.com. Also, Brighteon.com. Links to all of the websites of both guests will be in the program description box, available at HagmannReportLive.com. I want to thank both for their gracious gift of time. Steve, go ahead.
Well, first of all, again, we want to invite everybody. Well, we still have a couple hundred registration slots to come in here. The fact that we're having the assemblage of the different people from, and these are the top-of-the-line experts, including Mike Adams, we're going to see at Branson this year, I think, a quantum change in thinking. It's, I believe, literally the light switch is going to go on for a lot of people. And, Doug, this thing will be streamed worldwide. And I still get feedback of people like in the outback of Australia or in Siberia that are watching last year's conference and saying thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, go to Gen6, GENSIX.com, and sign up. And this will be, I don't think it will be repeated in this form or fashion because things are speeding out of control. And the idea is this, is that knowledge, if you don't think knowledge is power, look at the people that control the knowledge on the planet and see the power they possess. It's kind of interesting, Mike, because people always rail, on, quote, alternate news, but then they live in such a bubble, and they'll be the first ones to complain, like, for instance, when the Ridgecrest earthquake goes and the supervolcano, which just came out underneath, is now active. Well, they don't anticipate what they can't relate to on a daily basis. So forward thinking has been robbed from the generation that should be concerned. And you just said something about Austin. I've got a friend there, Ross. He said, Steve, I contracted, he lives in Austin or was there, contracted some kind of a viral pneumonia. And he said, he's in good shape. He's a physically fit guy. So now what they're doing to Austin, is it, and I don't know Texas that well, but Mike, is that the most liberal place in Texas?
Yes. Austin is a city of liberals surrounded by reality. And
okay.
they are destroying.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, that might be true of Branson, a reality, how should I say this, a reality check, because when you've got the Catholic Church and when you've got all the people becoming buddy-buddy for a new world order, a one-world leader, a global consciousness, and they're already talking, yesterday they're now throwing around a great word that, I don't think it's a great word, but they're using it, a ubiquitous undertaking, unparalleled. That means it's everywhere. It's the left, and it's also a supernaturally evil attempt at omniscience. So, when everybody's plugging in or they have Alexa or whatever those idiot boxes are, understand Mike, my favorite statement in the Borg from Star Trek is, you will be assimilated. My statement is, you have been assimilated. Kill Facebook, kill Twitter before they kill you. And by the way, all the words of kill, murder, rape, mayhem are all coming from the left. And when Ilhan Omar, how should I say this, the existential entity that would be hard to place in the human chain, in my opinion, is talking about the only thing that's going to save this country, which he loves more than we Americans, is locking up all the white guys. That's she said, locking up all the white guys.
She's one of the four horsewomen of the apocalypse, by the way. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say
quote,
this, in my opinion, the horse's rear of a pack of lies, the apocalypse and the pack of lies. So go ahead, Michael. And again, I just want everyone to go gen6.com and absolutely register. If you can't be there for whatever reason, then simply sign up for live streaming. And I'll be quiet. Michael, take it.
Well, no, not at all. I really enjoy this discussion, but you reminded me of something. Elon Musk has just announced neural implant technology and, of course, is touting how this is going to transform humanity to have all these microscopic wires implanted into your brain. And he says that it will then communicate with your phone via Bluetooth. Now, your phone, of course, is controlled by who? Either Google or Apple. So, in other words, your brain will be directly controlled by Google or Apple. This is the holy grail of what they've been looking for.
What could possibly go wrong?
Total control. Yeah, right. What could possibly go wrong? So that's one thing, and we might want to talk more about that. But the second thing that's noteworthy that's coming out of the news is the World Health Organization is panicking over another outbreak of Ebola in Africa. Now, these happen from time to time, but what most people don't know, although I know both of you guys do, is that Africa is the laboratory for bioweapons. So the U.S. military and other countries' militaries have labs in Africa, and that's how the United States gets around the treaty that disallows research into bioweapons. So they just do it in Africa, and from time to time, then they release one of these engineered bioweapons into an isolated tribe, and then they can study the effects, the transmissibility, how many days for the payload delivery, whatever the virus is designed to do. Africa is always the testing ground, and this new outbreak has hit a population center now in Africa. I don't recall which city it is, but the WHO is freaking out about it. Bioweapons.
Goma, Goma or something.
Okay, yes. So this will be, if you look at all the ways, we talked about soft kill technologies for humanity, infertility, but hard kill technologies will be that all comes down to bioweapons. So when the globalists are ready to pull the trigger and wipe out 30 to 90% of the population, the hard kill method to do that will not be a giant global nuclear holocaust, for the reason that they do not want to destroy the environment for the post-human era. Because post-human occupation, they don't want a radioactive world. But bioweapons can be engineered to target humans. In fact, they can be engineered to target specific races of humans. So there can be a eugenics bioweapons release, and the advantage to the globalists is, of course, that bioweapons can't be traced to their source of origin. So if someone launches a nuke, you know who launched it, right? We've got satellites, we've got tracking of trajectories and everything. You know who launched it. But if a nation launches a bioweapon and releases it in, let's say, 10 major airports, call it London, Heathrow, and JFK, New York, whatever. Pick 10 airports. They release it. It's like a 12-monkey movie scenario now. No one can trace it. And from the point of view of the globalists, it has the advantage of being self-replicating. So a chemical weapon or a nuclear weapon detonates once and then it dissipates. But of course, a biological weapon continues to self-replicate. And if it's engineered correctly, some people will be symptomless carriers, which means they will never show symptoms of the disease, but they can continue to spread it to others. In fact, I did an article on this. There's scientific proof that there are people in Africa who have immunity to Ebola, and they become symptomless carriers of Ebola. And Ebola can continue to exist in their systems, in their blood, in their body fluids, even sperm and other fluids, for many, many years. And this has been proven. This is not even it's not a controversial statement. So there are symptomless carriers. In fact, there are survival advantages in the genetics and the blood of Africans that actually helps them survive Ebola infections compared to Caucasians, who are actually more vulnerable to Ebola if they contract it. That's another fact a lot of people don't know. But in any case, the hard kill vectors can include 5G, they can include bioweapons, and they can include contamination of the food supply.
But Mike,
So
if I can ask you a question,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When people
go ahead.
talk, people talk about 5G, and Steve, I know you know this, but people will hear this and say, "Well, how in the world is 5G going to kill me? I mean, isn't this some sort of improvement over what we have?" In kind of a Cliff Notes version, can you tell people why 5G is bad?
Yeah, well, one of the main reasons is that 5G antennas can be, they are narrowly targeted, a very narrow beam at your device. So that's the advantage of 5G from the point of view of the telecom industry, is they're called phase array antennas. And so they're like a Rubik's Cube, a very tiny millimeter antenna that can be electronically controlled to generate an electromagnetic beam in a very specific direction. So what they do is they actually track you around the city, and they're beaming invisible beams at your head if you're holding up a phone to your head. Now what they can do simultaneously, this telecom system can be weaponized to project these beams at individuals for purposes of causing cancer instead of just handling their bandwidth. So a typical person might be walking around a city, sleeping in their apartment, let's say at night. They're not on their cell phone. There's no 5G beam at their head while they're sleeping. That's a normal situation. But someone who is an enemy of the state gets their cell phone number, then that they have an ID in the telecom system. What they can do is they can direct, let's say, 20 5G antennas at that person's head all night long while they're sleeping. They can essentially give them cancer, and they might only have weeks or months to live depending on their biology. And it can all be done silently with no record that it ever happened. So
right, and
it's an assassination.
Let me interject something, Doug and Mike. The announcement that the Pentagon now has basically a weaponized form that can be targeted against individual heartbeat, I think that was the giveaway, and pun intended, but that's the heart of soft kill. In other words, just as each human being has its own thermal signature, One of the martial artists years ago I interviewed, Mike, when I started on talk radio, Frank Dukes, the secret man, told me then that under Bill Casey, they could basically use their satellite sensing and pick out any single individual in a stadium of 50,000 people. But I don't know if you guys saw that, but that's a pretty paramount situation when they're saying that they can, and they said target an individual. Well, you only use targets for one reason, obviously. You either neutralize them or you kill them. So what was your response, Mike, when you saw that story the other day, that now they've got, in essence, you're just you're just a heartbeat away from someone blowing you away?
Well, my initial thought was, you know how there are ways to bypass facial recognition. And that's going to be a very important skill for survivors, by the way, to be able to paint your face or wear a disguise that can fool those systems. But if they can track your heartbeat, that's how do you get by that? What do you do? Run up and down stairs?
Yep, it can be done, and immediately. It's funny you would say that, Doug. You know me pretty well. And Mike, the deal is that was my first thought instantly. Oh, I know how to get around it, and I'm not going to say it on the air, but, let's just say this. Anything, here's what I've learned. For every measure, there's a countermeasure. For every countermeasure, someone's trying to counter your counter. But if you think it and you keep it simple, hey, tape recorders work fine. And not only that, but when I say different, frequency generators would really screw that up. So there are ways. And so, when you and I see each other, we'll compare notes. But the point being is that the targeting, and I don't think people understand this, every single aspect of humanity, this is my last statement because you've got to go in a few, 10 minutes or whatever, but every single aspect of humanity and original creation by the living God is targeted for death and destruction in their mindsets, is it not?
That's right. This is a war on life as we know it. And this brings in the demonic side or the satanic side because, as we all know very well, there are so many people now, they tend to be on the radical left, who are literal Satan worshipers or demon worshipers. They welcome demonic energy into their souls. And they begin, sometimes they even look like demons on the outside and act like demons as well. They do body modifications to look like demons. And so ultimately this comes down to a war of one faction is anti-life and the other faction is pro-life. And I don't mean just abortion. I mean pro-all life, pro-God-given life in our universe. So the anti-life faction is about destroying everything, destroying the food supply, destroying fertility, destroying knowledge. And that's why Google has aligned itself with the anti-life faction. It's about destroying your access to knowledge and destroying all knowledge that contradicts the fake matrix that they're trying to push on everybody. And then you have the pro-life side, the warriors for life. Like you, Doug, and Steve, and myself, and others, we are fighting for the protection and the sustainability of life as we know it, which not only includes human life, but our world, our plant life, the animals, the ecosystem, and the very existence of God, which we honor every day in everything we do. We're fighting as warriors for God and his vision of what life and creativity is supposed to be in the universe. We're just foot soldiers, really. But that's the war that's being waged. And I've come to the conclusion that 90% of humanity will not survive this war because they refuse to join the side of life. They either are uninterested in anything that we're talking about, and they're going about their lives not realizing they're committing slow suicide, or they've actively joined the anti-life factions, which you see represented in people like Ilhan Omar and AOC, who tried to push this, the Green New Deal, which would collapse the food supply in America. If you can't run diesel-powered tractors and food combines, you don't harvest food, and you have widespread starvation. In fact, a lot of this ends up in starvation. I've gone through this. I've sort of war-gamed many scenarios in this. You'd be amazed how many scenarios end up in starvation and a power grid failure. And a power grid failure, of course, means mass death in the cities, which are artificial constructs that actually are good metaphors for the artificial worlds that these people have created for themselves. But the average person who lives in Los Angeles today, let's say the real inner city of LA, without electricity or water, they're dead in 5 days, They're dead. They don't even realize that. They're playing roulette with their lives, and they have no idea. They're oblivious to the real world around them. But these are just some thoughts about what's coming. I know we can talk about much more in the future, and I'll be presenting a whole lot more in Branson. But I've got about 5 minutes here. Is there anything else, Steve or Doug, you want me to answer?
Real quick, Doug, Mike, obviously, what was the key point? And I know you've got 5 minutes and the whole deal, but what was the key point? Was there one thing that made it click that you saw the presence of fallen angels, aliens, demons, the satanic embrace of death? Was it one thing? Was there an actual on switch? Because you know a lot of stuff, and you've warned about a lot of stuff, written about a lot of stuff. But was there a turning point when you finally see? Because people are asking me, even guys that listen to you, well, why is this important to me? Why is this important? I mean, what turned you to recognizing importance? Because that's what this conference, Answering the Alien Question, is all about.
Great question.
What was it that turned you?
It was a realization that all the whole terraforming that's being pushed by scientists is not an accident. For me, it was a realization that these people are not making a mistake when they push for polluting the atmosphere, dimming the sun, shutting down CO2, that all these things have one thing in common: a non-Earth life form. That they're changing the planet deliberately to something that will not be inhabitable by us, but will be perfect for some other civilization or some other life forms that came from different environmental circumstances. It's a big cosmos out there. It's a big universe. And before this, Steve, I never talked about ETs or anything like that. It just wasn't my focus. But when this realization hit me, that our planet is being engineered deliberately and aggressively for a post-human era, then I couldn't ignore it anymore. And then all of a sudden, a lot of other things started to click into place, like Element 115 and propulsion systems, exotic technologies, all these other topics that suddenly make sense. Or why would, as some people say, why would visitors and observers, extraterrestrial observers, why would they nullify nuclear missiles that had been launched? Because they don't want this planet to be irradiated. The planet is what's valuable. Humans have zero value to them, but the planet is a strategic resource. I even mapped out the position of our Milky Way galaxy our solar system within the galaxy, and then the position of our galaxy within all the other observable galaxies. And guess what? Earth has a strategic location. I'll be presenting maps at the event in Branson. Earth has a strategic location that is actually very rare, even among the billions of other galaxies in the cosmos. There's something special about our real estate location from a cosmic point of view. So we have value, not humans to them, but our planet has value. And so they don't want the planet destroyed. They just don't want us on it. That simple.
That is the ultimate statement. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike will be the keynote speaker on Friday night. Gary Stearman, the keynote speaker on Saturday night, and then everybody else. When I say keynote, those are the night talks, but everybody else has 90 minutes to basically present you some of the most compelling evidence. And, one of the things, Doug, that's been astonishing to me is talking about aliens and fallen angels, the sexual corruption of the human race. Even the corruption of the human race started with sex, the fallen angels having sex, and now we're right back to sex, where sex is a big deal. But human biological reproduction is now taboo, and everything, including, don't kid yourself, bestiality, one of the biggest growing sexual perversions in the world, and I think it's Germany and Switzerland that lead the world in that. Isn't that interesting? So, ladies and gentlemen, when you come to Branson this year, sign up. Go to Gen6, GENSIX.com. Look at the speakers, and I can promise you this. There is nothing like it. Alien Con, all of Comic Con, all that. That's a whole different genre. These are legitimate people, and most of us are. I think you may be one of the youngest guys, Mike, but everybody there has gotten their battle wings pretty much, tested in the fight. So, Mike Adams, thank you so much. NaturalHealthNews.com.
Naturalnews.com.
Natural News. I'm sorry. Forgive me. And I was going to say thank you for what you do with Health News to tell people what we can do to, try and break their death grip on us.
Absolutely. No, it's an honor to be here. Thank you both for having me on today.
I can't wait to shake your hand in Branson, Missouri. Mike, I know you got to go. God bless you. Thank you so very much for your gracious gift of time. The archive will be uploaded. All right. Bless you, brother.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Steve, in the closing
moments. How long
moments,
do we have, Doug?
We got about, what did we got here? We got about 3.5 minutes.
Okay, well, what I want to draw everyone's attention to is the late Chuck Missler, probably one of the finest Bible teachers, so far ahead of his time. Gary Cole, who will be one of the speakers at Branson, one of the mystery speakers, I'm telling now one of the mysteries, but he just put together a tremendous documentary film. The trailer's up on my website. It's, you go over to the right side of my website, stevequayle.com. I'd encourage everybody to watch the trailer because Gary was the last guy to be able to film Dr. Chuck Missler for hours on end about Bible prophecy, about technology, and then I get to be blessed to chime in on some of the areas that were kind of my area of expertise, but it's going to be one of the most provocative DVDs, and when you see the quality of production, I think, a man's gift makes way for him. Gary Cole is probably one of the most talented men I've ever met in my life, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, he's a concert pianist, and the soundtrack for the Chuck Missler DVD is an original soundtrack written by a composer named Greg Sims, performed by the Prague Czechoslovakia Symphony that did the Star Wars theme, and it's a 70-piece orchestrated soundtrack that's just mind-blowing. And so I want everybody, if they could, to take a look at that trailer because it's important you understand that, I told Gary Cole this, and I'll say it, most people, when they pass into eternity, they leave a legacy, and that legacy lives on. A good example is Derek Prince and some of those guys. And I said to Gary, I said, Chuck better than Silicon.
Amen to that.
I could say something there, but I won't. But go ahead.
I could almost read your mind. With that, Steve, we're at the end of the show. I want to say God bless you. And by the way, we're looking forward to having dinner with the campaign we had earlier this year. We'll be talking more about that tomorrow. God bless you, Steve. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, and a special thanks to Mike Adams, ladies and gentlemen. In my opinion, and I know a lot of bright people, he is in a class of his own.
Amen to that.
And I mean that, genuinely.
And
goodbye, everybody.
As you
God
are.
bless.
All right. God bless. Good night. Folks, that'll do it. Be back tomorrow with video full on. Thank you, everyone, for listening. God bless.